I still remember the way his voice trembled when he finally said, "There's something I've wanted to tell you for years." In that moment, sitting across from my ex-husband's son in a quiet little diner, I realized this wasn't just going to be a casual catch-up. This was the kind of conversation that rewrites memories and changes the way you see your own life. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. My name is Linda. I'm in my mid-50s, and for a long time I thought my story with my ex-husband was finished the day I signed those divorce papers. We separated quietly, the way people sometimes do when there are no dramatic fights left, just silence and tired eyes. We didn't scream, we didn't break dishes. We just stopped being we. But there was one part of that marriage I never really let go of: his son, Daniel. Daniel wasn't my biological child. At the time I met him, he was already a lanky teenager with a permanent hoodie, and that guarded look boys get when they're not sure if they can trust adults anymore. His mother lived in another state, and he visited us every few weekends and some holidays. At first, he barely spoke to me. He'd sit at the table, fork in hand, answering my questions with one-word replies. "School going okay?" "Yeah." "Any friends coming over this weekend?" "Maybe." I told myself not to push. I'd seen enough troubled teens to know that forcing closeness usually makes them pull away more. So instead of questions, I offered consistency. I cooked his favorite pasta once I figured out what he liked. I kept his room ready, fresh sheets, and his favorite cereal in the cabinet. I learned the names of the video games he played, even if I didn't understand them, and I made sure he knew there was always a place for him in our home. Slowly, almost shyly, he opened up. It wasn't dramatic. It was small things at first, him lingering at the kitchen counter, telling me about a teacher he didn't like, or asking if I could help him with an essay. I still remember the first time he laughed at one of my corny jokes. It was a quick, surprised laugh, like it slipped out before he could stop it. I pretended not to notice how much it meant to me. Then years passed, and so did our marriage. When his father and I split, Daniel was in his early 20s. He didn't say much about it, just sent me a short message. "I heard. Hope you're okay." I replied, "I'm here if you ever need anything," and left it at that. It felt like the only respectful thing to do. He was his father's son, and I didn't want to put him in the middle. Life moved on. I moved to a smaller place, went back to work full-time, filled my evenings with simple routines, light walks, quiet dinners, the occasional call with old friends. Every now and then, I wondered how Daniel was doing, but I told myself it wasn't my place to ask. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed. I was sitting in my favorite armchair with a cup of coffee, listening to the sound of water against the window. When I picked up the phone and saw his name, for a second I thought it was a mistake. "Hi, Linda. It's Daniel. Is this still your number?" I stared at the screen longer than I should have before I typed back, "Yes, it's me. How are you?" We exchanged a few messages. He told me he was in town for a couple of days, on a short work trip. Then came the question that made my heart beat a little faster. "Would you like to meet for coffee?" I said yes before doubt could creep in. We chose a small diner not far from my place. It wasn't trendy or fancy, just one of those old places with red vinyl seats, a jukebox that rarely worked, and the smell of fresh coffee that somehow made you feel safe the moment you walked in. I'd arrived a few minutes early, nervously smoothing my blouse, suddenly aware of the faint lines on my hands and the gray strands in my hair. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. Daniel wasn't the shy teen in a hoodie anymore. He was taller, his shoulders broader, his face more defined, but his eyes were the same. Those thoughtful, observant eyes that seemed to take in more than he ever said. "Hey," he said softly, giving me a small, hesitant smile. "Hey," I replied, my voice a little weaker than I wanted it to be. We hugged, awkward at first, then a bit tighter. It felt like hugging a memory and a stranger at the same time. We sat down, ordered coffee, and went through the usual small talk. Work, the weather, the city traffic. He told me a little bit about his job, about how his mother was doing, about his latest move to a new apartment. I listened, nodding, but I could feel something beneath his words. A weight. He stirred his coffee more than he drank it, tracing slow circles with the spoon against the ceramic cup. Finally, he looked up at me, his expression turning serious. "I didn't just ask to meet to talk about work and all that," he said. I felt my stomach tighten. "I figured," I answered quietly. "What's on your mind, Daniel?" He took a breath, eyes dropping to his hands. "There's a story I've been wanting to tell you for a long time. I just never had the courage. And I think you deserve to hear it." The sounds of the diner seemed to fade a little, the clinking of dishes, the low hum of conversation, the distant hiss of the coffee machine. I focused on him, on the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tightened around the cup. "Okay," I said gently, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm listening." He swallowed, his gaze meeting mine again, and in his eyes I saw something I never expected. Not anger, not blame, but a kind of fragile honesty. "It's about my dad," he began slowly, "and about you, and about what I saw back then, when I was younger." In that moment, I realized my past was about to be retold, not from my perspective, not from my ex-husband's, but from the quiet boy who had been watching us the whole time. And whatever he was about to share, I knew it would change the way I remembered those years forever. He didn't begin right away. Instead, he paused, watching the steam rise from his cup, as if the words he needed were hidden somewhere inside it. I stayed quiet, giving him space. I could sense that whatever he was about to tell me wasn't something he had shared easily with anyone before. "When I was younger," he finally said, "I used to pretend I didn't notice anything in that house. Dad always said I kept to myself too much. But the truth is, I noticed everything." A small knot formed in my stomach. I didn't know what he had seen, or what he thought he had seen, but I knew the years with his father were complicated. Not cruel, not explosive, just strained, the way two people can drift apart without either meaning to. Daniel leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing the way they used to when he was trying to piece something together. "There were nights," he continued, "when you'd stay up late in the living room. You always kept a small lamp on, the warm one near the bookshelf. I'd walk past to get water, and you'd be there sitting quietly, looking tired but trying to hold everything together." I felt a small ache rise in my chest at his words. Those nights were some of the loneliest I'd lived through. The quiet hours after an argument that never truly happened, the silence between two adults who forgot how to talk about what hurt them. "I used to think you stayed up because of me," he admitted softly. "I thought maybe I was the reason things felt tense. I wasn't close to you or Dad back then. I felt like a guest in my own family." I leaned forward, instinctively wanting to reassure him. "Daniel, you were never the reason for anything that happened between your father and me." He nodded, but his expression didn't soften. "I know that now, but back then, I didn't. I was a kid trying to make sense of everything adults tried to hide." He took a breath, exhaling slowly. "There's one night in particular I keep thinking about. I've replayed it so many times I can still picture the way the hallway light looked." I sat still, preparing myself. "I heard you and Dad talking," he said quietly. "Not fighting, just talking. But your voice sounded tired, like you were trying not to break. And Dad, he didn't sound like himself. He sounded distant, like he wasn't even in the same room with you." I remembered that night instantly. It was one of the few times I tried to reach his father, to bridge the space between us. I had asked him what was wrong, why he felt so far away, and he'd given me those short, quiet answers that left more questions behind. Daniel looked down, rubbing his thumb along the edge of the cup. I didn't mean to listen. I froze. I just stayed in the hallway. And when you walked past me afterward, you didn't see me. I saw your face, though. You looked like someone trying very hard not to fall apart. The diner felt smaller in that moment, as if the weight of old emotions had settled around us. I took a slow breath to steady myself. "I'm sorry you had to see that," I said gently. He shook his head. "That's not the part that stayed with me." He hesitated. The part that stayed was what happened a few minutes later. My hands tightened around my cup without my meaning to. "You went into the kitchen," he said, "and I followed you. I didn't say anything. I just stood there watching from the doorway, and you didn't notice. You were trying to reach something on the top shelf. You stretched up, and then you stopped, and you started crying really quietly. Not loud, not dramatic, just quietly, like you were trying to make sure no one could hear." I looked down at the table, my throat tightening. I had no memory of the shelf, only the heaviness I carried those days, the kind that pressed down on you until even simple things felt impossible. "I wanted to help," he said. "I wanted to walk in and ask if you were okay. But I didn't. I felt frozen. I didn't know if I should talk or leave or pretend I didn't see anything." His voice grew softer. I went back to my room and I sat on my bed, and I remember thinking, she doesn't deserve that. You were the only person who ever made me feel like I mattered in that house. You listened to me. You talked to me. You never rushed me or treated me like I was a burden. The words hit me harder than I expected. I blinked, trying to hold back the emotion building behind my eyes. Daniel continued, "That night changed something in me. I realized adults can hurt in ways kids don't always understand. I realized you were hurting alone." He leaned forward slightly, meeting my eyes with a seriousness that felt almost protective. "I should have said something. I should have told you you weren't alone." "You were just a kid," I whispered. "I know," he said, "but I still think about it. A lot." The diner door opened behind him, letting in a rush of cool air, but neither of us turned. The world outside felt distant compared to the moment unfolding at our table. "So," I asked quietly, "is that the story you wanted to tell me?" He hesitated, and it was in that hesitation that I sensed there was more. Something heavier. Something that had shaped him far beyond that one memory. "Not just that," he said. "There's something else. Something I've never told anyone." He paused, took another breath, and looked at me in a way that made my heart thud once, sharply. "And it's about why I left home as soon as I could. I felt the air still around us. Whatever came next wasn't just about my past. It was about his. And I knew it was going to change everything I thought I understood about those years." He didn't speak right away, and the space between us grew heavier, like the room itself was holding its breath. I could see the shift in his posture, the way his shoulders pulled in slightly, as if bracing for something he'd carried too long. The soft diner lights reflected in his eyes, making them look far younger than the man sitting across from me. "When I was 17, he finally said, I decided I was going to leave the moment I graduated. People thought it was normal teenage stuff, wanting independence, wanting space. But it wasn't that." He paused, fingers tapping lightly against his cup. "It was because of Dad." My breath caught without meaning to. Not out of shock, but out of the quiet, familiar ache that came whenever someone mentioned the cracks in that old marriage. Daniel inhaled slowly. "I don't know if you ever saw it, or maybe you didn't want to see it, the way he talked to you sometimes. The way his voice got colder over the years. He wasn't yelling. He never yelled. But it was that quiet kind of disappointment, like everything was somehow your fault. His words hit with an uncomfortable accuracy. I remembered those moments, the subtle withdrawal, the brief looks that carried more judgment than any argument. They were small things, but collected over years, they could shrink a person without them even realizing. I didn't understand all of it, Daniel continued, but I understood enough. I saw the way you softened your voice around him, the way you second-guessed things you used to say easily. And I kept wondering why someone like you had to walk around on eggshells in your own home. My hands tightened in my lap, the memory of those feelings sharper than I expected. I didn't realize you noticed, I murmured. I noticed everything, he said gently. Kids pay attention to what adults think they hide. He shifted slightly, as if trying to decide how much to reveal. There's something I've never said out loud before. The reason I left home wasn't because I hated him. It was because I was scared I'd turn into him. That single sentence settled over the table like a truth long unspoken. His jaw tensed as he looked down, as if he were afraid of how I might react. You, I whispered, Daniel, you're nothing like him. He shook his head. Back then, I didn't know that. I saw how easily frustration turned into distance. I saw how silence became the normal way he handled problems. And I felt some of those things in myself. The anger I didn't understand, the confusion, the way I didn't know how to talk about what hurt me. I thought if I stayed long enough, I'd start treating people the way he did. I let his words sink in. It wasn't blame I heard in his voice. It was fear. A boy too young to name his emotions, but old enough to carry them alone. I used to lie awake at night thinking, what if that's who I'll become? He said. And then I'd think about you. How you never raised your voice. How you tried to hold the family together, even when you were the only one trying. Sometimes you were the only calm thing in that house. A small warmth touched my chest, mingled with sadness. You gave me more credit than I gave myself back then. You were the only reason I didn't leave earlier, he replied softly. I stayed because I didn't want to worry you. I knew something was weighing on you too. It felt like if I left, the last bit of light in that house would go with me. The confession was so sincere it made me sit back slightly, overwhelmed by the depth of it. But there's something else, he said, voice lowering. Something I've never told anyone, not even Dad. I met his eyes, and for the first time since he walked into the diner, I saw the trace of that quiet teenager who used to hover in doorways, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. What is it? I asked gently. He exhaled, steadying himself. Do you remember that weekend I left earlier than planned? The weekend I said a friend had called me and needed help. I nodded slowly. I remembered it clearly. He had packed faster than I'd ever seen, avoided eye contact, and left with a rushed goodbye. Something about it had never felt right. That wasn't the real reason, he said. The real reason was, I overheard something Dad said about you. Something that made me lose all respect for him. He paused, eyes flicking up to mine, searching. It wasn't about what he thought of the marriage, he added quietly. It was about what he thought of you as a person. A chill moved through me. Not fear, but the realization that the truth he carried might hurt more than I expected. And that, he continued, was the moment I decided I couldn't stay in that house anymore. The hum of the diner seemed to fade again, replaced by the thudding awareness that what he was about to tell me wasn't just history. It was something that had shaped him, shaped me, shaped the way he saw everything that came after. His voice softened, almost trembling. I think you deserve to know exactly what he said, because it wasn't true, and because it changed the way I saw both of you forever. He looked down for a long moment, gathering strength, and when he finally spoke, his voice had a quiet resolve that made me sit a little straighter. I was walking toward the living room, he said, and Dad was on the phone with someone. I still don't know who. A friend, maybe. But I remember every word, because it felt like someone had slapped me without touching me. My hands tightened around my cup, bracing myself. He said you were the reason everything in his life felt small, that you held him back, that you were too emotional, too soft, too careful, too slow, and that he felt stuck because of you. His voice shook slightly as he continued. He said you were the kind of person people settle for, not choose. The words didn't hit like a punch. They landed like something I had once feared in silence. A memory rose, half buried, of moments when he made me feel less without ever saying it directly. Those subtle sighs when I asked a question, the small dismissive gestures he hid behind a smile. I took a slow breath, keeping myself steady. Daniel looked up, and there was something protective in his eyes, something almost fierce. When I heard him say that, something snapped in me, because that wasn't the woman I knew. The woman I knew was patient, gentle, thoughtful. You weren't holding him back. You were the only person in that house who actually listened. A soft ache bloomed in my chest, but it wasn't painful. It felt like someone acknowledging a wound I'd been carrying alone. I wanted to walk into the room and confront him, he admitted, but I was 17. I didn't know how. All I knew was that I couldn't live in a place where someone treated you like that and expected me to respect him for it. He paused, eyes softening. So I left early that weekend. I had to get out before I said something I couldn't take back. I breathed out slowly. Daniel, I'm sorry you had to hear that. I'm not, he said, shaking his head, because it taught me something important. I realized the kind of person I never wanted to become. And I realized you were the only adult in my life who ever showed me what kindness actually looked like. His sincerity was almost disarming. I didn't know whether to smile or cry, so I simply sat still, letting his words settle. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table, and his tone became even quieter. I didn't just ask to see you today because I wanted you to know what happened. I came because I've been thinking a lot about the past, and about how you shaped my life without even trying. My heartbeat lifted with a subtle warmth. You taught me how to speak gently, he said, how to be patient, how to treat people with respect instead of shutting them out. You taught me that strength doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes it shows up in the way someone holds a household together without applause. I exhaled, touched in a way I hadn't expected. And I never thanked you, he added softly. Not once. You don't need to thank me, I said, my voice warm yet steady. You were a boy doing his best. We all were. But I want to, he insisted gently, because I think you deserved better than what you got. And I think part of me always wished I could have done more to protect you. His words were so genuine, so earnest, that I had to look away for a moment to steady myself. Kindness, spoken honestly, has a way of unlocking old doors we thought we'd sealed. The waitress came by to refill our cups, and for a brief moment the spell softened. But when she walked away, Daniel continued in a quieter, more reflective tone. There's one more thing, he said, something I want you to hear. I nodded, giving him my full attention. You're not someone people settle for, he said, meeting my eyes directly. You're someone people grow because of. I know that because I'm one of them. The words landed with a slow, deep warmth that filled the spaces in me that had been empty for years. I felt a small, genuine smile forming. Daniel, that means more than you know. He returned the smile, a grown man's smile, but with a trace of the boy who once stood awkwardly in his bedroom doorway, unsure how to speak his heart. After a long, quiet moment, I asked, So why now? Why tell me all of this after so many years? He hesitated, then answered with a calm honesty that felt like the final missing piece. Because I realized lately that the people who shaped me deserved to know they mattered. And out of everyone from my past, you mattered the most. Something inside me softened completely, not from sadness, but from a sense of closure I didn't know I'd been waiting for. We talked for a long time after that, about his life now, about the things we both learned, about how sometimes the people who disappear from our homes never fully leave our hearts. When we finally walked outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, and the pavement shone under the streetlights. Daniel walked me to my car, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. "Can we stay in touch this time?" he asked, a hopeful tone beneath the calm words. I smiled. "I'd like that." He nodded, relieved. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes the family we think we've lost finds its way back to us, not out of obligation, but out of choice, out of truth, out of gratitude. As I drove home that night, the city lights passing softly around me, I understood that the story Daniel shared didn't just reveal the past. It healed a part of it, and in that healing, both of us found a little more peace than we had before.